would have loved to have been listening to Kendrick Lamar from the birth of his career, from the really early days, and followed him from then right up until now, because I think that would have been a pretty cool thing. It really would have. I mean, there's obviously people that are quite a bit older than me that have already been, exposed to that, and they were listening to him from his mixtape days right up until now. But I'm not going to act like I did. I mean, in 2011, man, I was listening to some like Kerrang pop punk shit. I remember talking to my friends about hip hop in 2011 and 2010, and we would always be like, yeah, rapping, it takes talent, but it just doesn't sound good. That was the kind of mindset I had when I was a teenager. So yeah, this was way beyond my listening habits, way beyond my listening habits back then. So this is a particularly interesting album to talk about for a decade later, considering that Kendrick Lamar grew to be one of my favorite artists of all time, one of my favorite rappers of all time. And 10 years ago when this dropped, hadn't even heard of him or didn't know anything about the genre of hip-hop or any rappers ever. Jay-Z, Kanye, Eminem were like the three names I probably would be able to name back in that year. So Kendrick Lamar, Section 80, a decade later. Here we go. So I think it's pretty safe to say that this album hasn't garnered the same amount of love as his follow-up releases. I mean, I don't think that's controversial, is it? Good Kid, Mad City, To Pimp a Butterfly, Damn, even Untitled and Mastered. I think all of those have kind of trumped Section 80 amongst his fans, amongst hip-hop fans, as being better albums than this album. I think the one thing you could accidentally fall into the trap of with artists like this is going, well, maybe it was good, but like everything else that they did is way better. But I'm going to try and not do that, because I think most fans would mostly agree with that idea anyway. So saying that doesn't really help, but I'm just going to view this as a standalone album, as an album by an artist, just try and view it in the most neutral way possible, and just reel off my actual thoughts on what I'm listening to whenever I play this album. And I'm always honest with you guys on this channel. I would never lie about my opinion just to appeal to other people. I just say how I feel about things, and honestly, I just don't really see that much greatness in this album, to be honest. Again, trying not to think about everything he did afterwards, just viewing this as a standalone release, I think it's kind of meh. I don't think this album's completely terrible or anything like that. I think there's some good tracks on here. There's some good moments, some good lyrical moments here and there. It's not particularly that consistent with the lyrics, honestly. And in terms of choruses and hooks, I think it's actually relatively weak. I'm certainly never blown away by Kendrick's bars on this album, like, at all. But there are moments where I'm enjoying his verses, and then a chorus comes in and interrupts the entire flow, and I'm just like wondering where or how they managed to work in such a weak, limp chorus when it didn't need to be there. I'll get onto those later though, because I do think the first couple of tracks don't really have anything like that at all. Fuck Your Ethnicity, the opening track, bars on the lyrics kind of a bit all over the place. It's interesting to see how he wasn't that tidy with his bars back then, because only a year later he gave us such a conceptual and grand release with Good Kid, Mad City that it's kind of crazy to think that the chorus of this track has one idea and the rest of the song I don't really think really holds up with that idea. So the chorus is pretty straightforward, obviously talking about how he doesn't care about whatever skin color you are. He ends the chorus with fuck your ethnicity, which I think is a bit of a blunt way to try and get your point across. Not to say that I'm offended by that. Oh no, I'm so upset. But I just think you could probably word it in a better way than he does. And I don't know, man, I've seen people say like how old granddads and grandmas will say things like, I don't care about your skin color and all that kind of stuff. And people spin that on social media and say that when old people say that, they're actually being racist, which I don't know if I agree with, but I just think it's interesting that, no one would say Kendrick Lamar is doing anything harmful with what he's saying. But like I've seen on social media in the past, people will say when older white people say it's offensive and they're actually racist. I don't know. What's the answer to that? Is it racist or is it not? I don't know. I think the gist of what he's saying is absolutely fine. I don't know. I just see a debate on this and I'm not sure what the right answer is. I'm just a guy that reviews music. I don't have the answer to these social issues, honestly. I don't think I can do anything to change anything, really. It's a very interesting way to open up your album, honestly. I find it quite intriguing that he started an album in this way. It's certainly not what Kendrick Lamar would have done even today or just a few years later. He would never have made a track like this, I don't think. He usually uses the opening track to set things up, to set a scene, I feel. And it's interesting how, you know, of course, his debut album didn't do that. I find it quite intriguing watching his progression. But the track coming after this, Hold Up, is fine. I don't think the hook is particularly that catchy. I see people say it's a really good chorus, but there are a few choruses on this that I actually just don't think are particularly very strong. Ronald Reagan era is similar to that, actually, where it uses the Wu-Tang reference, a pretty standard, obvious reference, honestly. Most rappers will take any opportunity to mention Wu-Tang at some point, and Kendrick was not a stranger to that. And then the whole like whoop-de-whoop thing just sounds a bit cringy. There's just plenty of choruses that I think are meant to be catchy and they just don't land, and it's weird because Kendrick can do a great chorus, but I don't think Hold Up is particularly very good, and I don't really think Ronald Reagan era is a particularly good chorus either. We see the drug references on ADHD, not in the way you might necessarily expect though, because obviously Kendrick Lamar has always had his beliefs and opinions on drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. We've seen it across pretty much every album of his, actually. You can tell that he is very skeptical of falling into the trap of becoming addicted and, you know, relying on these kinds of substances because they can completely ruin your life. I mean, it's like anything. You could become addicted to anything and it has potential to ruin your life. But of course, depending on your own context or your background, your I guess childhood, anything you've seen in your life, your environment, you probably have particular thoughts on certain things that you just don't want to dare touch in case that you do become addicted. Again though, lyrically I don't think it's like as strong as what you want a song like this to be. Like, I don't think everything he says lands, but I think it works for what he's saying generally. Maybe this is another moment where like it suffers from the fact that he did do this again with swimming pools and it's just way better when he did it that way. It's also just a way better song in general, and that's where this album kind of falls short. Like, I'm not really hooked by a lot of what's going on. The beats are fine. The choruses, I keep saying, aren't particularly that great. The lyrics are pretty okay. Like, I'm not every opportunity this album gives me to be sucked in, I'm just like getting closer and closer to not being so. I'm like this. I'm going backwards. It just ends up completely losing me though with some of the tracks like No Makeup, where I think the chorus is awful. Not necessarily for the lyrics. I get the theme, but the way the guest feature is singing it sounds so ugly. I don't get this track at all. I've always seen people say it's one of his weaker tracks, but I don't think it gets enough hate. Like, the chorus is so grim, it sounds awful. I just can't help but view it like a Roots song that has gone completely wrong. Like, they've picked a pretty weak vocalist for the track. It has a bit of a Roots vibe to it generally, but just they ended up accidentally picking a singer that just doesn't fit at all. Yeah, I just don't like this track at all, man. And then Tammy's song, don't really think the vocals here particularly that great. Kendrick's doing his whole like gimmicky weird vocal thing that again can sometimes be fantastic. I just think it sounds pretty grating here. And then lyrically and the theme kind of reminds me of something Eminem would do, so it just has this bit of a shock value to it that just doesn't totally land. I think this album ends up being best when Kendrick isn't really trying anything that's totally out of the ordinary and he's just kind of straight up rapping. Po Man's Dreams, probably one of the best tracks here in my opinion. I think his rapping sounds pretty good. He's just lacing himself with the beat really nicely. He's just rapping. This is just a rap track. There's no annoying out of nowhere chorus on this one. The line about how rappers using bigger words when his simplicity is actually more pivotal is pretty clever. And I think that has stayed true actually for the entirety of his career. I mean, 10 years later, I think that stands very well because Kendrick doesn't actually go out of the ordinary with his themes. He does keep things simple. It's always laid out to you in a pretty straightforward way, but like the way he does it is always insane. And I think that's one of the truest bars I think he's ever laid out in his career. But yeah, like the rest of the album keeps hitting me with the same issues. Keisha's song, I think the hook on here is weak. The whole like Keisha Tammy thing that's going on the album never really fully lands actually. It's quite a strange theme that I don't think ever properly got well thought out. Rigor Mortis I always see labelled as one of his best tracks, but I think the kind of like horns that are in your face for the first few seconds are enjoyable, but then it takes over the whole song and it's like, do something different. This is too boring now. I'm hearing the same tune repeated like over and over again. Lyrically, I think this one's just a bit overly edgy too. He's comparing himself to like dragons and how he's gonna kill you, and the rigor mortis is going to kick in when Kendrick Lamar comes around. The Marilyn Manson reference, which sadly has now aged quite badly because of recent exposures of what Marilyn Manson is like as a person. That's not Kendrick Lamar's fault, but I guess it just adds to the edginess anyway though, because Marilyn Manson always had that persona, and a rapper comparing themselves to Marilyn Manson, I don't know, I just think it's kind of lame actually, to be honest. Kendrick doesn't have to prove himself to anyone. I've got a pen for some reason, actually, I'll put that down. He doesn't need to be comparing himself to other people. He is who he is. Making these kinds of comparisons I just don't think lands. I appreciate the BJ the Chicago Kid feature though. It's actually kind of crazy because I feel like this guy has been around a lot longer than I had realised, because I've always seen his name crop up. I've heard a few of his albums, but I didn't really think he'd been around that long, but he obviously has. He sounds good on this track. He adds a nice vibe to what the instrumental is providing. Blow My High though, I mean, I guess the vocals here are attempting to be like druggy and atmospheric, but like they're so irritable. Like again, another chorus that just does not land, but at least we get high power towards the end of the album. I think this is probably again up there with Poe Man's Dreams as being one of the best tracks. The hook on this one's just really good, and Kendrick sounds really slick over the beat too. There's just nothing out of place here at all. It's just a really good poppy, peppy rap track that I think, again, Kendrick, it just sounds like he's in his bag here. There's no annoying choruses. There's, the beat's good. It's not so-so, it's not average, it's not a bit meh. It just, everything is sounding good. I think it's a shame that I took till right to the end of the album to have one of the best sounding tracks here. Not to say that everything sounds bad before it, but in my opinion, I think a lot of the beats are just really standard. I wouldn't go as far as saying the album's aged badly, but it's aged in a way that just makes everything come across as mundane. There's not a single beat on this album that makes me go, whoa, whoa, whoa. There's no mic drop moments with Kendrick's bars. It's just all in this like mid-range throughout the whole thing. And the theme doesn't really tie up that well. Yeah, it's just, looking at it as a standalone album, it's just pretty meh. Without looking at everything that Kendrick has done, everything else, looking at this as a rap album, a hip-hop album from 2011, I just think it's meh. So there you go. I guess there's nothing else to say. Maybe you will completely disagree with everything I've said here, which is a shame. I don't want you to do that. But if you do disagree, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Maybe I'm speaking in a completely different language to you guys, especially if you are absolutely in love with this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I just don't think it's really stuck with me over time, but that's just how I feel. Let me know your thoughts. Would love to hear what you think. Thank you. Have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already as well. More videos like this in the future. Tell me what else I should do in this series as well. Have a good day and goodbye.